Margaret Greenwood.
To ask the Secretary of State if she will make a statement on support for people formerly receiving severe disability premium who have transferred to universal credit.
Minister Justin Tomlinson.
Mr. Speaker, universal credit is the biggest change of the welfare system since it was created. It is a modern, flexible, personalised benefit reflecting the rapidly changing world of work. When designing universal credit, a choice was made to not replicate every aspect of the disability provision in the legacy system. However, I want to make very clear that our intention was that no money from this area would be taken out of the system. Universal credit was therefore designed with all of the money from the old disability premiums recycled to target support for the most severely disabled. And disabled people are some of the biggest beneficiaries of universal credit, with around 1 million disabled households having on average around £100 a month more on universal credit than they would have had on the legacy benefits. Now, Mr. Speaker, on Friday, the High Court handed down a judgment in relation to universal credit and the severe disability premium. The severe disability premium is an additional premium payable with means-tested benefits such as ESA. Universal credit is more targeted and support is focused on those who need it most. Transitional protection will be available for people who are moved onto universal credit from other benefits, provided their circumstances stay the same. And we are pleased that the Court recognises that it is for ministers to frame the appropriate transitional arrangements for moving claimants onto UC, and we will consider all our options. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to delivering a welfare system that supports disabled people.
Margaret Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 7th of June, the Government pledged that severe disability premium claimants would no longer have to transfer to universal credit until managed migration started. Yet for months afterwards, they were still required to do so until the Government finally introduced an SI that came into force on the 16th of January. Severe disability premium doesn't exist in universal credit, so in transferring they lost about £180 a month. Often that was just because they'd moved home. Their postcode changed, but their needs didn't. Yet the Government planned to pay them only £80 a month in compensation, far less than they would have received if they were to transfer under managed migration. Little wonder that the High Court said in its damning judgment on Friday that the Government's decision had no logical foundation. Payments to former SDP claimants are part of the regulations for managed migration pilot. The Government has still not scheduled these for debate, so no payments at all have been made, and the judgment throws the Government's plans for the pilot into question too. So, will the Government ensure that payments to former SDP claimants who have transferred to universal credit fully reflect the loss they have suffered? How many SDP claimants in total transferred to universal credit before the 16th of January? What assessment has the Government made of the hardship that former SDP claimants who have transferred to universal credit are suffering, and the impact on those children who have had to take on additional care responsibilities as a result of their family's loss of income? Will the Government publish a clear timeframe to identify and compensate disabled people for the losses they have incurred? And will the Government separate regulations for the payments to former SDP claimants from those for the pilot for managed migration, so that members of this House can vote separately on each separately? These are people who, by definition, are already having to cope with some of the most severe medical conditions and with disabilities. They should not have to fight through the courts for the support they should be entitled to. They deserve better.
Mr. Speaker, to reiterate, we haven't taken any money out of the system. We are rightly targeting support at those who need it the most. For example, under legacy benefits, those on ESA support would have expected to get £160, 5 pence per month. But under universal credit, it is significantly higher, in fact more than double at £336.20 a month, which is why over 1 million households with disabled people will be on average over £100 a month better off. And this goes in hand with our attempts to simplify the system, where we're taking 7 disability premiums down to 2, because the legacy system was difficult to deliver, prone to error and often confusing. And this is why we saw under the legacy system that over £2.4 billion worth of benefits went unclaimed every year. That's 700,000 of the most vulnerable people, on average £280 per month, missing out. Now, in addition to this support, many claimants will also be entitled to support with PIP, DLA, attendance allowance or adult social care. And for those that are going through the managed migration, they will get full transitional protection. And we went further with good intentions by introducing the gateway on January the 16th, including those with changed circumstances. And, Mr Speaker, we will be considering all options in light of the judgment, and we will update the House in due course.
Sarah Newton.
Speaker, I welcomed the introduction of the gateway back in January. So can my right honourable friend confirm that this means existing recipients of severe disability payments will be moved onto universal credit with transitional protections so that they are fully protected as they move across?
Good point.
Minister.
I know that I'd pay tribute to the former Minister who did a huge amount of work in this area, making sure that there was suitable transitional protection for some of the most vulnerable people in the system. And it is absolutely the case that those that are part of the managed migration will get full transitional protection.
Alison Thewlis.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. We welcome the High Court decision and commend the individuals who brought their case for their perseverance. It's absolutely extraordinary that the DWP thought they could get away with the short-changing of claimants who had already been made worse off by moving on to universal credit. Because of the entirely arbitrary cut-off point where the DWP decided to stop naturally migrating SDB claimants, many thousands will miss out on £1,000 per month. This is completely unacceptable. The ruling acknowledges what the SNP have been arguing since December, that the Tories in Westminster are short-changing claimants who are owed back payments as a result of having their severe disability payments stopped. It's not only appalling that the DWP are short-changing claimants, but appalling that people are now going to have to wait for those back payments until the managed migration regulations are put through. And even then, it might take months to administrate them. My colleague, the MP for Glasgow North West, has twice written to the Secretary of State asking for her to immediately initiate back payments so that people don't have to wait. Will he tell his House why the payment of this money has been pegged to the managed migration regulations? And now that this ruling has allowed him to take stock, will he sort out this issue once and for all and immediately put together regulations which legislate for the full back payments as a matter of urgency? There are now not one, not two, but three ongoing cases of the DWP needing to investigate and initiate back payments of disability benefits on an enormous scale due to error or due to their policies being deemed unlawful. Will he ensure that no cuts to other areas of government spending are being made to cover the cost of cleaning up his department's own mess? And does he really believe that after all of this, disabled people who require support can have any confidence whatsoever that the DWP have their best interests at heart?
I thank the honourable member for the points raised, and to be absolutely clear, those that are part of the managed migration will get the full transitional support. And the whole point of the gateway was to provide additional support for those that had changed circumstances that wouldn't have been entitled to the full transitional protection. And I absolutely understand the point about the urgency of bringing forward the regulations, but it's at the same time making sure that those are done in the correct manner so that we don't replicate the errors of the legacy benefit that was difficult, complex, that we see all as individual constituency MPs in our surgeries, where some of the most vulnerable people in society are missing out on the benefits that we all agree they are entitled to.
Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Of course, people with disabilities must be properly served by our benefit system, and I know, because I know the Minister well, that he will be working extraordinarily hard to ensure that that is the case within his department. But is it not the fact that universal credit is targeted far more effectively on ensuring that those who need it most get the help that they need?
Honourable friend, and I know he works extremely hard in this area, and I've done a number of visits to his constituency where I've seen him champion local organisations making a difference to disabled people in his community. And absolutely, universal credit targets the support at those that most need it, which is why, on average, over 1 million disabled households will be £100 a month better off.
Ruth George.
Thank you very much. Severe disability premium does what it says on the tin. It goes to those with the most severe disabilities. So why then is the Minister claiming that people who need support most are gaining, where people with severe disability premium, over 10,000 of whom are now waiting for back payments, like my constituent, logging up nearly £1,000 owed to them by the DWP, building up rent arrears and in danger of eviction, are not being treated properly by bringing forward this legislation and paying them what they are due.
Well, we are all keen to bring forward those regulations, but I remind the honourable member that if you look at the legacy benefits, on an ESA support, a claimant would expect £167.05. Under universal credit, the equivalent will be £336.20 a month, more than twice the amount under the legacy benefit.
Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those of us across the House will have experienced problems that our constituents are facing with the transfer to universal credit, and that's particularly the case with the disabled. But we mustn't lose sight of the successes, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Grimsby Telegraph carried a report from where Mr. Mark Code said, "So I signed up for UC, and it has been one of the best things that I have ever done, because it not only got me back to work, but provided me with mental support mentally, as it forced me to get out of the house and stop wallowing in the grief following the death of my partner." Would the Minister agree that we must focus on the successes and ensure that all cases result in that equally successful?
I thank my honourable friend who raises a very important broad point. Universal Credit, for the first time, offers personalised, tailored, bespoke support, which is why if members visit their local job centre and talk to staff, particularly experienced staff, they feel that they are empowered for the first time to make a real difference to people's lives.
Jardine.
Much. Does this latest botched attempt not just underline that part of the reason that the government is having trouble with universal credit is because it's primarily designed as a work-related benefit and continually misses out the people who need it most? And will the government now retable the managed migration regulations without the hard stop?
Minister.
Well, I don't recognise that point. As a government, we're spending £5 billion a year more on supporting people with disabilities and long-term health conditions through the main disability benefits. We are rightly targeting support that those most need in society, and through universal credit, that is coupled with a personalised, tailored and bespoke service.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The loss of severe disability premium continues to cause hardship to people in my constituency and across the country, forcing, in some cases, people to fall into rent arrears and extreme poverty. Could I ask the Minister what specifically he's doing and the Department's doing to support people in those situations?
Well, through the universal credit system, for the first time, they will actually have a named work coach who can help them navigate not only any individual challenges that they face, but the additional support that they can get, rightly making sure the most vulnerable people in society are getting both the financial support and the time from their named work coach to make sure they're in their best position.
First glove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What steps is he taking to cascade the detail of this to advice services so that they can best help and support those who come to them seeking that help?
I think my honourable friend raises a very important point. Not only do stakeholders and those with real, genuine frontline experience work very closely with us and help shape our policies going forward, but we recognise that they can actually play a key part on the front line, which is why I very much welcome the announcement that the Citizens' Advice would be present across the Job Centre network to provide additional support for claimants above and beyond what our frontline staff do.
Chris Stevens.
Mr. Speaker, we know that approximately 20,000 people died before the Department was able to review their ESA backdated payments, and this cannot happen with the severe disability premium payments. So has the Department investigated if this has happened with claimants owed SDP payments, and if so, how many? And in the event of death, who will receive the back payments and who will receive?
I thank the honourable member. Well, the key priority for us is to make sure we get money to the most vulnerable in society as quickly as possible, which is why our commitment remains that we will bring forward those regulations at the earliest opportunity.
Vicky Foxcroft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In March, I raised with the Minister the case of a constituent with a severe brain injury who applied for universal credit in August 2018 and immediately lost his severe disability premium. The Minister requested that I write to him. As yet, I have received no response. My constituent has now been without his severe disability premium for almost 9 months. This vulnerable individual needs action. Will the Minister get a grip of this?
Minister.
I apologise to the honourable member that I haven't seen sight of that yet, and I will make sure as a matter of urgency I do, and I will respond personally.
Fangham Debonair.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my constituent suffered severe trauma and severe mental illness. This 4 years ago, when he filled in his form, some mistakes were made, but mistakes that could have and should have been picked up. As a result, however, he's had to wait years for money he was owed in back payments. But the problem I want to raise with the Minister is the fact that our local money advice service was not able to get a response from DWP, and it was only when my caseworkers got involved that the £15,000 he was owed was repaid. What's the Minister going to do to make sure that DWP staff are actually responding in a timely manner to money advice staff?
Minister.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, because what we would like to see, and there's many cases of best practice, are local support organisations working hand in hand with the local job centres, so that we, particularly the most vulnerable claimants, get that additional support as they go through the system.
Al Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm afraid, despite the Minister's words about paying more money out, it does seem to me that he is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Now, given the weakness in advice services locally, particularly at a higher level in rural areas such as mine, will the Minister provide honourable members with a geographical distribution of a breakdown of the 10,000 or so cases, so that honourable members can reach out properly?
Well, I thank the honourable member who I've worked with closely on other issues before, and just to be absolutely clear, from the legacy benefit to universal credit, we haven't taken money out. We are targeting it at the most vulnerable people, and overall our spending on those with disabilities and long-term health conditions has increased by £5 billion per year. And the key in all job centres, there will be the support of citizens' advice to give that additional support for claimants who wish to have that support.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A constituent who was forced onto universal credit with no protections has lost a considerable amount of money to help with their living when a severe disability payment stops. Now he learns she may have to wait 6 months to see any money, even when the regulations are passed. How on earth are disabled people supposed to cope in the meantime?
Minister.
Well, the whole priority of our reforms are to make sure that the most vulnerable get the most support within the system. Without knowing all the details of that case, it's difficult to comment, but I am happy to look at those details.
Mr Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the Department contacted all those who have lost out on payments, and if not, when will the Department do so? And will he commit to ensuring that there is absolutely no burden placed on claimants to apply for back payments of severe disability premium, and that his department will take on the burden of gathering the available evidence to help ensure that payments can be made as soon as possible?
Well, the judgment was only on Friday, but we are urgently considering all the options available to us. But once we're in a position to, we absolutely will make sure we communicate with all claimants.
Jim Cunningham.
Very much, Mr Speaker. Hasn't the Minister got the message yet? This system is not working, and it's been repeatedly pointed out it isn't working. About a fortnight ago, I visited one of the biggest food banks in the West Midlands, and they're the people that are helping out people on benefits who can't claim their benefits. Why don't you scrap it and start again?
I couldn't disagree more. Under legacy benefits, the benefits that the honourable member is seemingly advocating we go back to, 700,000 of some of the most vulnerable people, many of those the ones who are in the food banks, are missing out on £2.4 billion worth of support. He can shake his head, but these are some of the most vulnerable people. We are making a simpler, clearer system so those vulnerable people aren't missing out on the support that they are.
Stephen Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's rather frustrating that, yet again, with this government, people have had to go to court before we get some change in acknowledgement. But I do know the Minister, and I respect him, and he's been very helpful with me on a number of issues. So can I just have a commitment on the floor of the House that the DWP will ensure that anyone who has missed out on severe disability premium, there will be retrospective payments, so ultimately they will get what they're entitled to?
I thank the honourable member for his very kind words, and I have enjoyed working with him on a number of issues. Obviously, we've only had the judgment on Friday. We have to consider those options. But to be clear, this was about the additional support put in place with the gateway, and therefore we've got to look at that. But as our commitment remains, those who are part of the full transition will get the full support.